So, our last speaker for the evening is Ken Sanford, whom I always consider my guru for crash mail. His mammoth work on airmail crashes of the world is the ultimate reference work today on the subject, and it has a very easy to read and search digital version. Ken is an aviation industry veteran, specialist collector of Imperial Airways mail. He has won several medals for his exhibits and served as past president of the American Airmail Society, and he's a member of the board of directors. He's responsible for the air crash section of La Catastrophe, the journal of the Wreck and Crash Mail Society, and his articles in every issue are something we all look forward to very much. The energy and passion that Ken brings along with his love for aerophilately is amazing. You know, amsipex went live. It had my crash mail exhibit in the invitee section. Within a few hours of that, I must have received 5 emails from Ken with feedback. He couldn't wait to complete going through the whole exhibit. Every time he saw something, he'd send an email to me, some feedback, some suggestion, pointing out some mistake I've made. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for that, Ken. We look forward to hearing more about air crashes of Imperial Airways from you.
Okay, I'll share my screen. So as it was pointed out, I've been collecting crash mail of Imperial Airways for 40 years. My other specialty is Pan American Airways crash mail. Imperial Airways was Britain's first international airline. It was formed by the British government in 1923 as the Imperial Air Transport Company. This was an amalgamation of 4 independent airline companies: Hanley Page Transport, the Instone Airline Limited, Daimler Airway, and British Marine Air Navigation Company. Then the new airline's name was changed to Imperial Airways on April 1st, 1924. The first crash from which covers have survived, or which we have recorded, hold on a minute, it's not going to the next one. It's very slow. It's taking forever. There we go. This was one of the predecessors, Air Transport and Travel. It was a de Havilland DH4 going from England to Paris, and it crashed at Eltham, Great Britain. This is the only recorded cover, and we can tell that it's from that crash because it did get a backstamp in Paris, as you can see. So although the predecessors and Imperial had a number of crashes during the years from 1920 to 1929, no covers are known from any of them other than the one I just showed you. The next one where we have a cover is from the city of Cairo. Remember, Imperial named all their aircraft. So this was called the city of Cairo, and it was in Iraq, and it flew into a sandstorm, and they had to make a forced landing in Amara on 5th of June, 1929. That was a de Havilland DH-66 Hercules aircraft, and this is the only recorded cover from that. The next one was the city of Jerusalem. This is going very slow this morning. Sorry about that. This was, it crashed in Jask, Persia on September 7th, 1929. And it was carrying about 25,000 pieces of mail, all of which was destroyed. And this is a cover from England to Transjordan, which was offloaded before the crash. So none of the 25,000 have survived. The next one was actually 2 crashes in one day. This was a refueling stop on the north coast of Egypt on the Mediterranean. It was called Mersa Matruh. And there was the city of Alexandria which on landing in Mersa Matruh for refueling, they struck a buoy and crashed. And luckily, they had another aircraft there, the city of Athens. So they offloaded all the mail and put it on the city of Athens. And on takeoff, it hit a submerged rock. And so the hull was broken open, so they couldn't continue. So this is a large envelope, or what's remained of it, not much left, going to Calcutta, India. And this next one is an ambulance cover from that. And this is one of the earliest recorded ambulance covers. Sorry, we missed. Okay, there's the ambulance cover. That was also to Calcutta. The next crash was the city of Washington, and that was flying from France to England, and it crashed it had engine failure, and they encountered fog, and it crashed into a hillside near Neuchâtel, France. That was on the 30th of October, 1930. The cachet that was applied says damaged by fire, but then they crossed out the word fire and wrote in flight. So I guess they had used that cachet on something else previously where there was a fire involved. So that's an interesting cover. In 1931, Imperial was, sorry, wrong one. Hold on a minute. Okay, in 1931, Imperial was starting its first service through to Australia. So this was an experimental flight going from Karachi to Australia. And they ran low on fuel, and the pilot had to land, and he saw a field that looked like a good place to land, but unfortunately was full of rocks. And so the aircraft was quite damaged. The well-known pilot from Australia, Charles Kingsford Smith, flew up to Kopang and picked up the mail and carried it on down to Australia. So he took it to Darwin, where it was handed over to Qantas, the Australian airline, for the rest of the trip to Melbourne. And this is a cover to Sydney. The next one was the city of Karachi. This crashed near Linga, Persia, on the 22nd of August, 1931. They encountered engine trouble, and they had to make a forced landing in the desert. This is about 100 miles west of Bandar Abbas. The captain, his name was Mollard, Captain Mollard, walked for 5 hours to get help, and he returned with a search party after dark. The engine was repaired, and they left the next day with the passengers and mail for Basra. This is the only recorded cover from that incident, and it has a damaged by sea cachet on the back. I don't know why they used that cachet, because this didn't happen in the sea, but that's what they did. Imperial started operating from England down the east coast of Africa in 1931, 32, all the way to South Africa. And this was the first northbound flight from South Africa to England. And it took off from, well, actually, what happened first at Salisbury, Rhodesia, the landing gear, as they were taxiing, they had filled in an anthill, and it was all soft earth. So the landing gear sunk into this soft earth, damaged the landing gear. So they had another airplane, the city of Delhi, which then took the mail and the passengers, and it was flying near Broken Hill, northern Rhodesia, and it got caught in what they called a black storm, which was a severe thunderstorm. And the pilot had to land someplace, and he saw what he thought was a clearing, and it actually turned out to be a swamp. So he landed in this swamp, and the aircraft got stuck and couldn't take off from the swamp. So the passengers and the mail were sitting there for a few days, being bitten by mosquitoes and not very pleasant. And finally, they were rescued. And when a search party found them. So this is an interesting cover from Southwest Africa. It's an official cover on His Majesty's service in Afrikaans and English. And then the top cover is one of the Imperial Airways covers that they prepared for the flight. There's quite a bit in mail from this because, of course, it was a first flight, so they're carrying a lot of covers. The next one was a southbound flight in Africa. This was the Hanno. It was a HP-42 Hannibal class aircraft. It was flying to South Africa, and a lightning burst struck a tire between Masindi and Kampala. And on landing at Kampala, the aircraft overran the runway and ended up pitched up on its nose. Both propellers actually pierced the fuselage. The captain was thrown out of the cockpit, and both pilots suffered concussions. So this is the mail wasn't damaged, so there's no cachet. So covers are pretty scarce from this. Here's a picture of the aircraft after it landed on its nose. The next crash was the city of Khartoum. That was a short S-8 flying boat, and it crashed on landing in Alexandria, Egypt, 31st of December, 1935. The pilot, Vernon Wilson, was found swimming in the water 5 hours later. He must have been a good swimmer. 71 bags of mail were salvaged. The mail was to India was spread out on a lawn to dry in front of the post office in Bombay. I have a photo of that showing all the letters spread out on the lawn. This is an unusual origin, a cover from Denmark to Surabaya and Java. Most of the mail on this was from Great Britain to India and Australia and so on. The next crash was, here's another cover from the city of Khartoum. It's an official cover from Adelaide, Australia, which has a nice salvaged ex-city of Khartoum cachet. And here's another third cover from that crash, and that is from England to Surabaya, Dutch East Indies, and it has a Dutch East Indies label cachet applied, and it mentions the aircraft city of Khartoum. And here's the photo of the mail being dried out on the lawn in Bombay. If I can get it to come up, this is very slow today. Oops, sorry, wrong one. There we go. This is from a newspaper article, The Statesman. Okay, the next crash was a southbound flight from England to South Africa. And it took off from Petersburg, South Africa, and it didn't have enough altitude, and it hit trees at the end of the runway and crashed. The mail wasn't damaged other than a corner torn off. And there were less than 10 pieces recorded from this. And the pilot signed all the mail after the fact. So there's the pilot, J. Spafford was his name, signed all the covers. These are quite scarce. The next one is a famous crash. It was a short S-17 flying boat called the Scipio, and it crashed on landing in Mirabella Bay in Crete. It was carrying a lot of mail, and at least 50 different cachet and label varieties have been recorded. Here's a cover from Palestine to Germany. Or sorry, to Holland. A lot of covers are also known from Palestine to Germany. This is a cover from also to Holland, from India, from Calcutta. And most of the mail to the mainland Europe was processed through Paris. So this has a little label cachet applied in Paris in French. This is a cover to England from Crete. This was applied by the return letter section of the post office in London with a little label cachet which mentions the name of the aircraft, the Scipio. This is a very unusual cover. It's from India, and it's a morning cover addressed to England. And the damage by water cachet was applied in England. Okay, the next one was the this is an interesting situation from this. There was a report in the Daily Telegraph, the newspaper of England, about the state of affairs at the London sorting office. And this is a quote from that. "The floor is ankle deep in the stamps of almost every nation, east from Egypt to New Zealand. Generally, the first thing that happens when a letter is dried is that the stamp peels off. All the stamps are sent to the return letter section where they are carefully preserved for 6 months before being sold. After receiving a stampless letter marked damaged by seawater, you may apply there for the missing stamp or one like it," which is pretty funny because you wouldn't have any idea what stamp went with your cover. There's another quote from an unknown book. "According to my calculations, we were now closing fast on Crete, where if they had been compromised by headwinds, the flying boat skippers could stop for extra fuel at Mirabella Bay, notorious in aviation circles for its treacherously clear water. Incoming pilots tended to see it only seconds before the instant of impact. After several dangerously heavy landings, Imperial's engineers were asked urgently to devise equipment that could give true indication of altitude. What they came up with were net containers secured to each wingtip and filled with ping pong balls. At the appropriate moment, the nets were released and the balls bouncing across the limpid water gave the pilot a crucial visual reference. We don't know if this really worked. Probably not, because the aircraft is moving forward, and by the time the balls would hit the water, they would be behind you and you wouldn't even see them. So I don't know whose crazy idea that was." The next crash was HP-42 Hannibal class named the Horsa. This had to make a forced landing in the desert south of Salwa Wells, Doha, on 29th of August, 1936. The crew and passengers had to endure the night in the desert, and the aircraft took off the next morning. The mail wasn't damaged, and this is the only cover recorded. This is a cover from India. To India from England. And there's a picture of it after the forced landing in the desert. The next one was the Armstrong Whitworth Atalanta class aircraft on the 29th of September 36. It was getting ready to take off from Delhi, India, and it caught fire before takeoff. All the passengers and crew jumped out and they were not injured, but the aircraft was completely burned out. So you can see just the burned out framework of the aircraft. A lot of the mail was recovered, and there are many different cachet varieties. This is a cover from England to New Zealand. And it got a small little cachet damaged and received in damaged condition at Auckland. Most of the mail was to Australia and some to New Zealand. This one was to Sydney, Australia, and it got a 2-line cachet in Sydney. This one was to Penang in Malaya, and has a little mimeograph explanation that they sent along with the damaged covers. The next crash was the Capricornus. This was a short S-23 flying boat. This was on its maiden flight, first flight in scheduled service, and it was near Lyon, France. The weather was bad. It was snowing. The pilot got lost. He was supposed to land on this on the Saône River in Lyon, and instead he crashed into the Beaujolais Mountains. And actually, a few years ago, the French put up a monument in that place where it crashed, and I actually was there at that celebration and saw the actual location. And you can still see the 2 pine trees that the aircraft hit. It was on the edge of a pine forest. Everybody on the airplane, there was only one passenger, and then there was a crew. Only the co-pilot survived. He was able to crawl to a nearby farmhouse for help. And the mail wasn't damaged, or not badly damaged, so no cachets were applied. The covers are very rare. This is a cover from England to India. And it was interesting, when I went to that, where they put up the monument, there was a Frenchman who was a child, lived nearby when this happened, and he took his father's Brownie camera and took pictures, and he gave me the negatives. He still had the negatives. The next one was a short S-23 flying boat going from England to, from Australia to England, called the Courtier, and this crashed on landing in Faileron Bay, Greece. Lots and lots of covers were carried on this. There's probably 30 or 40 different cachet varieties. This is an interesting cover. It has a paquebot cancellation from Port Said, Egypt. This is another cover from that crash. It's from Palestine. And it's interesting because the sender must have known what the schedules were, because KLM and Imperial Airways were operating to Europe. And so the sender wrote KLM because he intended to go on the KLM flight. For some reason, it missed it and got on this Imperial flight, which then crashed. And the damage by seawater cachet was applied in London on arrival. Here's another cover from Palestine to Austria, to Czechoslovakia, which is a very unusual destination for covers from this. The next crash was also a short S-23 flying boat called the Cygnus, and that crashed in Brindisi, Italy on December 5th, 1937. This is a nice cover from New Zealand. It was a cover actually from Cook Islands. And I think this is a first day cover of overprinted stamps from New Zealand stamps, but from the Cook Islands. And it got the damage by seawater cachet, which is applied in England. This is a little mimeograph explanation which the London Post Office prepared, which explains the crash. This is an ambulance cover from the Mount Pleasant Post Office. This Mount Pleasant Post Office in London handled most crash mail from that period. The next crash Imperial Airways had was also a short S-23 flying boat, the Calpurnia. This was going from England to Australia, and it was in Iraq, and it crashed on Lake Habanya, November 27, 1938. A lot of mail from this. This is an interesting envelope from England to Hobart. It has a typed explanation on the back flap of the cover and a big cachet salvaged ex Calpurnia, which was applied in Hobart. Is another cover to Perth with a label cachet on the back. This is a very interesting one. This is a short S-23 flying boat, was going north from South Africa to England on the 15th of March, 39. It was supposed to land in I think it was Tanganyika. The pilot got lost and he had to put it down somewhere. He saw a small river and he landed, and it was actually in the Belgian Congo near a place called Faraji. And the river was too narrow, and he hit a rock, a big boulder under the water when he landed, and the wingtips were touching the shore on each side. It was a very narrow river. And after this happened, they sent the Imperial people and the short people down to repair the aircraft, and it took months and months to repair it. There was a missionary there who got a lot of natives to help with all the. They had to build up a dam on this little river to make a long enough area for takeoff. And finally, after about 6 months, they finally took off, and the aircraft continued to fly all during the war. This is an interesting cover from Johannesburg to France. And I did a talk on Imperial crash mail in South Africa a long time ago, maybe back in the 80s. And the guys in the Airmail Society of South Africa said, "Oh yeah, Seeger's Butchery is still in business." Here's a picture of the aircraft after the landing and when they hit a rock. There's another cover from the Corsair, very unusual, addressed to Paraguay. And the mail was processed through Paris, so that's why it has a French cachet on it. The next one was the Centurion, and that crashed on landing at Calcutta on the 12th of June, 39. And the post office made up a cachet with the John Bull rubber stamp set. So it's where you put the letters in individually. So you have many varieties with upside down letters, reversed letters. The one on the right is spelled Centuria instead of Centurion. We have 40 or 50 different varieties of cachets from that. Here's a newspaper photo from the crash. Sorry, it's taking so long. You can see all the passengers and crew are waiting on the wings of the aircraft, waiting to be rescued. A boat came out from shore and rescued them, and then a few minutes later it sunk. And then you can see just the tail sticking out of the water. The next one was the Dardanus. This was a de Havilland DH-86. That wasn't a flying boat. That was a aircraft with regular landing gear. And that was going from Hong Kong to Bangkok. And they happened to overfly an island, a Chinese island called Wai Chao. And the Japanese were already on this island, had already taken it over. And a Japanese fighter went up and started shooting at the aircraft. And they shot over 80 bullets, but luckily none of them hit anything critical. And the pilot had to land on that island. And the pilot and the passengers were held by the Japanese for a few days. The UK was not yet at war with Japan. They protested, and the pilots had to patch up all the bullet holes as best they could, and then they flew back to Hong Kong after a few days. This is a very unusual cover, which has the cachet applied in Hong Kong after they returned, and it's addressed to Suva in Fiji Islands, which is very unusual. This is a cover to Australia. This cover is actually in the National Library of Australia, and you can see it has a bullet hole right through it. That's a very, very unusual. Here's I guess, a newspaper photo of the aircraft, and you can see all the various bullet holes in it. Here, you can see all various bullet holes. Bad photograph, but that's the best I can find. So, although Imperial had a few crashes after November 39, no covers have been recorded from any of them. In March 1940, they are operating a Handley Page 42, the Hannibal. It disappeared over the Gulf of Oman with 8 people on board. No wreckage, no cargo, mail, or occupants were found. The cause of the crash remains unknown, but fuel starvation, a bird strike, damaging a propeller and causing an engine or a wing to separate, an in-flight breakup, or multiple engine failure were theorized. 2 months after the crash, the HP-42 was withdrawn from passenger operations, and they also recommended that all commercial aircraft used in long-haul flights over water be equipped with personnel and group life-saving gear. This would later become standard throughout the airline industry. And on 1st of April 1940, Imperial Airways and British Airways, not the current one, but the British Airways airline at that time, were officially combined into a new company, British Overseas Airways Corporation. And then much later, then BOAC and British European Airways were combined into what is now British Airways. In 2003, I published a book, Imperial Air Crash Mail of Imperial Airways and predecessor companies. And that then last year or 2 years ago, we combined this book and the American Airmail Catalog Crash Section and the Near-Inc Crash Catalog into Air Crash Mail of the World. It's not a printed book because it's 2,400 pages and it would be just too big and too expensive. So it's a flash drive which you can plug into your computer. And it's available in as PDF and Word on this flash drive. And I'll just give another plug for the Wreck and Crash Mail Society. We have about 80 members worldwide. We publish a quarterly journal. I'm the editor. And we have articles about air crashes, shipwrecks, train wrecks, terrorism, natural disasters, anything to do with catastrophic mail. So if anybody's interested in the air crash mail of the world, you can email me. I can show you my email address. Hold on a minute.
Ken, you could type your email ID on the chat.
Yeah, here I'm putting up my. Oh, that's backwards. That's anyway.
Oh, no, that is just right.
Okay, is it okay? You can see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Aerophil@gmail.com.
Okay, I'm going to type it in the group chat.
Yeah, this costs $34 US, including postage worldwide. And we've sold a lot of these. We've sold about 200 of them already just in 2 years. So anybody have any questions? I'll be glad to answer them.
Ken, I have a question, not directly on your talk, but just the period after that. So, during World War II, we have a lot of crash mail to and from India, particularly to England and to some other countries. But the way crash until 1939 has been so well documented and easy to research, the wartime crashes are just a big, big mystery. So is anybody able to do anything about it?
No, the problem was that when there was a crash during the war, they were too busy fighting the war and didn't have time to document them properly and record things properly. So a lot of them, we don't know what aircraft was involved. We don't know how much mail was recovered. It's very difficult. There's the air crash mail of the world. We do show a lot of them, but in most cases, we don't know what aircraft was involved. A lot of them were military aircraft, of course, during that time. A few of them were commercial, but most of them were military aircraft. And the records were just not kept. So that's why we just don't know much about them.
Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed with a lot of your covers, they're missing stamps. Now, I understand that the mail gets waterlogged and, and the adhesives, come off and stuff like that. As a collector of interrupted mail, if the stamps if someone's put the stamps like in the envelope or is there an attempt to put the stamps back on, or do you think that it's more appropriate to leave it in the condition that it was when it was rescued, or what's your thinking?
In all the flying boat crashes, or most of them, the stamps were soaked off and the stamps were separated from the cover. I have a couple of covers where you can see that the stamps were saved and put back with the cover, but that's very unusual. Do
you advise against it? I mean, in the event that somebody has the stamps, do you feel like it's more appropriate for them to be on the cover or off the cover?
Well, it doesn't really make any difference. I mean, the ones that I have are, you can see where they kind of tried to stick it back on the cover, but the postmark doesn't match up with the cover to the stamp, so you can see that they tried to put it back on. It's interesting. When my exhibit was judged many years ago, the judge said that I should show rates, which is ridiculous because how in the hell can you show what the rate was when the stamps are gone?
Yeah.
And anyway, rates are irrelevant as far as crash mail is, in my opinion.
They always want something. Yeah.
Yeah. And another judge one time said, "Oh, your covers are in terrible condition." Well, of course they were.
Yeah. Well done, Ken.
Well, yeah, we'll throw it open for any more questions, comments people in the group have. So I have some in the chat. Stefan Brilliant says, interesting talk, reminds me of the Belgian crash mail specialist. I forgot his name. So Ken, you want to talk a
That
little?
was Henry Nearing.
Yes, talk about
Henry Nearing.
the
Yeah,
connection.
he wrote
Yes.
the catalog of crash mail other than U.S. and Canada, 1992 and 1995. It was in 2 volumes. And he was a good friend of mine. I used to go cross-country skiing with him when I lived in Switzerland. He would rent a chalet in Switzerland every winter for a couple of weeks. We incorporated all of his book into the Air Crash Mail of the World. And he was amazing because he didn't have a computer, he didn't have a scanner, and he produced a really fantastic 2-volume catalog on crash mail of the world.
We have a comment from Roger Skoils. He says, thank you all organizers and speakers. Look forward to next year. All the best. So with that, I think we come to the end of today's long session. Thank you everybody for staying on board.